Thank you for coming. I wanted to come talk about burnout because I think it's something that impacts almost everybody at some point in their career. It's something that I think a lot of us can relate to. And it's something that I've gone through personally. I have a story about this we'll get to about halfway through the talk. I hope when we're done with this today that people will have some things they can take away to help them through burnout and that they can use to help other people through the process as well. Before we begin, I really need to give some acknowledgements here. Two people, Dr. Christina Maslach and Dr. Michael Leiter, they are sort of the authorities on occupational burnout. They've studied it in many different disciplines, many different industries, and they found that occupational burnout happens to everybody. It happens regardless of what profession you're in. Everybody is susceptible to it. And they've written up a lot of documentation around this. They've published a lot of academic papers, and they've written some books. One of which is I'm going to blank on the name now. I've got it written down later on in the talk, though. Sorry. But they've written a lot of books on occupational burnout. And if you do want to learn more about what it is, what it does to people, how it impacts them, I would go read out about them. The Etsy operations team and my friends and family, for reasons that we'll get to in the middle of the talk. The first sort of 10 minutes of this are a little bit dry, and I do apologize for that. There's some very important stuff we have to cover about what occupational burnout is, I think, before we can really talk about how it impacts us and how we get through it and what we do about it. And at the end, there'll be a little bit on how you can stay sober, I call it. Just not let yourself be brought down by burnout. So what is occupational burnout? Well, first I want to address what occupational burnout isn't. There have been a lot of talks at Velocity and at other places previously that people have given on burnout. And I think a number of them miss the point a little bit. They usually talk about an aspect of burnout, such as feeling very tired, just being exhausted. How do you not be exhausted at your job? They talk about how to deal with being bored on the job. But these are actually small pieces of a much larger picture that occupational burnout represents. So I think in order to actually discuss it today, we need to look at it more holistically. Occupational burnout really is rooted around three things. It's around exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. And when you have all of these things in balance, when you don't feel exhausted, when you don't feel cynical about your job and the people that you work with, the company that you work for, and when you feel like you're doing a really good job, when you feel like, I can get things done, I can produce things on a daily basis, you feel good about your job, and no one feels like they're really burning out. You can have any one of these symptoms. You can go through any one of these problems by itself and not be burning out. But when you're going through all three at the same time, that's when we say that a person is going through occupational burnout. When you're going through all three of these, there's different levels of, exhaustion and cynicism and inefficacy. You can be a little bit tired, you can be a little bit cynical, you can be really ineffective, you can get to the point where you're not able to do anything at all day long, when you're really, really burnt out. When it gets to about that point in the cycle, it turns out occupational burnout presents itself very much like clinical depression. About 90% of the people who have very severe occupational burnout, their symptoms are exactly the same as clinical depression. It's very hard to actually distinguish between the two problems. So how's it caused? What causes occupational burnout? Dr. Maslach, in her writings, has described that there are 6 antecedents of burnout, 6 things that lead up to being burnt out, that contribute to the exhaustion, cynicism, inefficacy factors. And all of these are things that we, as people, as we do our work, need to feel connected to. You need to feel like you have a manageable workload. You need to feel like you're not overloaded with work. Makes sense, right? That's usually the first thing we point to when we say, I think I'm getting a little bit burnt out. I've just got so much going on. There's just so much work. You also need to have control and autonomy over the work that you're doing. No one likes to be micromanaged. Hands up if you like to be micromanaged. No one, right? So we all love to have autonomy and be able to do our jobs the way we want to do them. You need to feel rewarded for what you're doing. You need to feel that the way you're treated by your colleagues, by the people that you work with, the people that you work for, that they're going to treat you in a fair way, that you're not going to be marginalized for whatever reason. You need to feel like you have shared values with the people around you and the company. I love working at Etsy because we have a very strong social mission. We're a benefit corporation. We care about our community. We care about the environment. These are things that are personally very important to me. So I feel very connected, for example, with that. And there's community. Community in this sense can talk about broader communities like the open source community, because it's a very important part of the field that we work in. It can feel like a community like this, the Velocity community. We're all here today to talk about this a little bit and learn a bit about it. Or it can be the community of the people around you at work. But this needs to be present. Solving burnout's pretty easy. Just work less. It'll be fine. That's all there is to it. No. There is a path. There is a very specific path that people go through when they are starting to burn out. And you may not go through all of these steps. We're going to go through them. It's called the 12-step program. You may not go through all of these. You may skip one. You may do them in a slightly different order. But generally, people go through these things. Usually it starts with a compulsion to really want to prove yourself at something, at a job, at a new job, at a project you're doing, at a new team that you want to work with. You really want to do something to prove that you're a valuable person. As you start doing this, you may start to work a little harder. Good, everyone should work hard, what we should do. But you may start to work harder in unhealthy ways. Maybe you stay late one night a week. That's no big deal. Two nights a week, 3 nights, eventually it becomes 4 nights or 5 nights a week. And then you start ignoring other priorities. This thing we talk about, work-life balance. I don't know anybody who doesn't pay lip service to work-life balance, right? I like talking about work-life balance. I like talking about the fact that I work a lot and I don't have a life. That's my work-life balance. I'm a workaholic. But work-life balance is really, really important. And you start ignoring it. You start ignoring your friends, your family, because you want to, going back to the beginning, you want to prove yourself. You want to prove that this thing that you've been given, this task you've been given to do, you can do it. So you start ignoring other people to try and get it done. After a while, you might start blaming other people around you. It happens. The cynicism kicks in. You might start blaming other people because you need help with the thing that you're doing, but no one's providing the help. Maybe you didn't ask them for help, but they're not giving it, so that's the point. You start blaming other people. You can also struggle to really actually isolate at this point because emotions are starting to get confusing for most people when they get to about the 4th step on what the actual problem is that you're trying to deal with. You're starting to feel a little bit tired. You're starting to feel a little bit cynical. You're feeling like the people around you may not be helping you as much as they could be, but you can't figure out why any of this is happening. Who's been through these steps? Oh, come on, who's been through these? Yes. A lot of us have been through these steps. None of this is necessarily new. I've seen people go through these steps, get to step 4 and say, I don't want to be on this team, I don't want to be in this company, and just walk out. Happens. Once you get past that point, you start thinking that the work you're doing, the things that you're trying to accomplish, have to succeed. There can be no failure. If you've heard of sunk cost fallacy, it's the idea that once you've invested some resources in a project, in a thing that you want to get done, those have to be recovered. You can't just call it quits. And it's a fallacy because it's not true. If you've sunk things into something that's failing, cut it loose, move on, right? You don't keep pouring money into a failing thing. Government projects are a great example of this, right? It happens all the time. But you start feeling like this absolutely has to get done. After a while, you start blaming the work itself. So you've blamed your colleagues. You've probably started blaming your company, your team. Now you start blaming the work itself. This project was doomed to fail from the start. Why did I get it? Who gave it to me? They must be out to get me. All right, okay. Once a month, okay. We'll go with it. It's cool. Keep going. Okay. So if it gets louder, orderly exit through the door that way. The tone's increasing, that's for sure. Okay. So you get through this. You've started blaming your team. After a while, you start withdrawing from work outside, your life outside work. You start withdrawing from it. You start to dream about your work. A lot of people have told me this. This is such a common thing. When you're burning out, when you're so deep in it, you start having these weird dreams about problems that you want to solve and how, like, what weird solutions you might come up with. And usually somewhere around this point, it's probably been a few months if you've gotten this far, other people have started to notice changes in your behavior. You are angrier. You are more cynical. The cynicism is showing now. You're unhappy with things that are going on. But you don't see how they could possibly understand what you're going through because no one's gone through this before and not to this level. Woo, it stopped. No one else has had to go through this. You're the one who's dealing with it. Who's gone through this? Wow, pretty much the same hands. I'm a little worried now because I really don't like it when people get to the last 4 steps in this path. This is when things are really, really bad. The inefficacy is taken over. You're just not getting anything done. You might be sitting at work all day long, 8, 10, 12, 14, 18 hours a day, but you're not getting anything done. You can't because your body and your mind are exhausted. And all you can think about is, why can't I get this done? Why are people not helping me? This is going to fail. There's an emotional withdrawal and an emptiness that comes in here as well. The depression I mentioned at the beginning, this is where it happens, right here, near the very end. And when you hit full burnout, there's deep depression. Sometimes you need professional help to get through it at that point. And worse. All right, so that last bit was a little bit intense, I'm sorry. Didn't mean it to be. But it's something that we had to talk about. We can take a break for a moment, look at a cat. This is one of my cats, his name is Ether. We call him Ethernet. He's big and fluffy, and we found him outside our house about 8 years ago. I look at this picture when I'm feeling sad. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about some burnout that I went through a few years ago. And we're going to walk a little bit through those 12 steps so that hopefully we can see how these things happen, how they manifest. It started in about June of 2013. I took on a simple project, a little project. It wasn't big. We were using a piece of software. It's one I've talked about previously. And we want to replace it with an open source equivalent. Sounds good. Replacing a proprietary black box thing with open source. We all love open source, right? Yeah. Yeah, nuts, woo. Yeah. It's great. And these are projects that I'm sure a lot of us have done over time. I thought, how hard can it be? It's just a little thing. It's just a little thing that we use at our company. Just switch it out at some point. It'll be great. As I started learning about it, I realized there was a very, very steep learning curve for this new piece of software. And it took me months to actually get my head around it. Use Elasticsearch. Yes, people who are laughing, you know what it's like. It's bad. It's a very steep learning curve. It's a great piece of software, but it takes time to really understand it. So I spent a few months just absorbing everything I could about Elasticsearch. It's a lot of fun. And I really wanted to prove that I could do this, that I could move us to a project that is more aligned with our values by being open sourced, by saving us money, and other things that went wrong with it. Who was I trying to prove it to? Looking back on this, I can't actually figure out who I was trying to prove this to. It certainly wasn't my team, because my team already knew that I could do work like this. It wasn't the larger organization at Etsy. I already knew most of the people in the engineering organization, and they all knew I could do this work. It wasn't my management. I'd been recently promoted. They already had faith in me being able to do this work. Looking back, I can't actually figure out who I was trying to prove this to. So then I started working a few late nights. Not many. I might just stay awake till 2 or 3 in the morning, once or twice a week. It's not that bad. If you remember, this is June 2013. So in the US, where I live, school vacation is on. I have kids, but because I don't have to wake up in the morning, I can stay awake as late as I need to doing work. Sounds good. At first, no one really minded. Everyone thought, yeah, this is important. Aveline's got to do it. We won't say anything about him working really late last night. Okay, he missed a meeting this morning. Nah, it's no big deal. This is important stuff. There was only one person on the project. That was me. This turns out to be a really big problem and a really big contributor to burnout when you have no one else to work with on the thing that's causing you to burn out. And to be fair, everyone else was busy. Everyone had projects to do. The company was growing. We're trying to hire more people. It takes time. All the more reason that if I can pull this off, everything will be great. Of course it will. So I can work a little bit harder. Maybe I'll stay awake till 5 o'clock. 4 nights a week. Every night of the week. Summer's over. I can't sleep in every day. I have responsibilities. I have to get the kids ready for school in the morning. I have to get them to school. Have other things that need to get done. This starts to make me feel a little bit more tired. You can't stay awake until 3, 4, 5 in the morning every night and expect to be able to take care of your life. Just can't do it. But my family is very supportive of me. They understand how important it is that I get this work done, so they start picking up more of the slack that I'm not doing around the house. I'm shirking my responsibilities and other people are picking up that work. It starts happening at work too. I let other projects go. Around December 2013, I'm just completely exhausted. I don't know what's going on. This is actually the point where I'm starting to wonder if I'm burnt out, because I didn't know about anything other than exhaustion being a component of burnout. So I'm thinking I'm really tired. I might be burning out. But that's okay. There's not much left to do in this project. I keep telling myself there's not much left. It's been 6 months. There can't be that much left. But I've gotten through the initial learning phase. I've gotten through that ramp up, and I understand the software, I understand the thing I'm trying to get done. I've talked to other people about this. Everyone's on board, and we're going to do it. And looking back on it, one of the things that actually really contributed to the problem going forward was the fact that my colleagues were proud of what I had done, of what I achieved. Everybody gave me a pat on the back and said, wow, you've done all this amazing stuff in 6 months. This is great, well done. And all that did was feed back into, yes, obviously, what I've done right. Okay, I just have to stay awake all night forever now. A few more months go by, and I'm realizing this is taking a lot longer than it was supposed to. Back in June of 2013, I thought, 3 months, maybe? I'll have it done. We're 9 months in now. And I refuse to accept that this can't be done. I've spent so much time and so much energy on this. How can I just let it go now? I really am most of the way through it. I keep telling myself this. But it's also at the point where I'm just not able to do the work. I sit there at my desk all day, and I'm just staring at the screen. Just staring at the screen. Somebody will ask me a question, and eventually I'll get around to answering it. And I still don't understand why others won't help me. Little clue, I didn't ask for any help. I know that now, but at the time, you don't understand, you don't grok why people won't just offer you help. You don't understand why they can't see the way you're dealing with this, what you're going through. You even start wondering if they're actively trying to sabotage the work you're doing. What other explanation could there be? And around June, so it's been a year now, it's starting to get especially bad. Exhaustion, inefficacy, off the charts. Super cynical about the people I work with. The work is very, very depressing. I don't want to do it anymore. And it was actually around this time that I started entertaining some thoughts of suicide. I didn't do anything. Fortunately, I'm too scared of doing anything like that. But you think about it. When you're that far down, when things feel that hopeless, these thoughts come to you, and it's scary. What I didn't know, and I know now, is that there was a conspiracy going on. Not the one that I'd been thinking about this whole time. Laurie Denness, Patrick McDonald, Mike Rambetzi, John Cowie, Ryan France. This was my team. I'm a remote engineer, and I go to our office in New York at the time, about every 3 months. And I turn up one day, and suddenly there's an invitation in my calendar. Tea and chat. Well, on a team at the time, I think of about 6 or 7 people. 3 of us were British, and we loved tea, and we loved to chat. So I thought, okay, I can do this. Sounds good. Somebody wants to have tea with me. I like that. The only 2 people on that invitation were Laurie and my boss, Mike. Laurie's one of the other British people, so I thought, oh, there must be something going on with him. So I went back. I looked over all the work that Laurie had been doing over the last few months, all the things he'd said, and I started to think about all the things that could be wrong with Laurie. Yeah, joke's on me, right? We walk outside the offices, a beautiful park. We start walking down there. I'm like, so Laurie, what's going on? He says, I'm fine. What's going on with you, Aveline? We talk, and we talk, and we talk, and we talk. Hour turns into 2, into 3. I think we were actually there in the end for maybe about 4.5 hours. By the time we're done, I have nothing left to give emotionally. The dam has burst. I've been crying. They've been crying. It's extremely difficult to actually go through what had happened. Because I've been feeling like for months nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen to me. But all it took was 2 people sitting down and asking me how I was doing. A few weeks after that, I took my first vacation, first one I'd taken in about 5 years. And I realized it took me, it was a 3-week-long vacation. And it took me a solid week, 7 days, before I could stop thinking about the work that I was doing, the work that needed to be done, the work that I wanted to do. It took me a week just to get that out of my head. And I realized that friends and family are very important to what we do here. I've been neglecting them for coming on to a year. And I realized how important it was to have a life outside work. Anything at all. Hanging out with your friends. Having a hobby. I took up photography. Really enjoyed it. It was great fun. But I realized how important it is. And when I got back to work after my vacation, it was almost like I was starting a new job. Almost like I had to start over again, from scratch. Because you've been doing this thing, you've been going through this burnout process for so long that you've missed a lot of things that are happening. You've missed connections that have been made between people. You've missed work that's happened. You've missed the things that people have talked about. Family changes, all kinds of things. And this recovery, once you get to this point, it can take months before you get back to where you were. It's a slow process. You can't rush it. But there are things that we can do. There are really positive things that we can do to help us get through this and stop us falling back into that cycle, stop us going through that 12-step program again. The first is to be really aware of those 6 factors, those 6 connections that we all need to our jobs. You want to make sure your workload isn't too high. You want to make sure you have autonomy in your work. You want to make sure you're rewarded fairly for what you're doing and you feel good about that. If you think you're underpaid, you want to talk to somebody about that. If you feel like your working conditions aren't reasonable, you want to talk to someone about that. You want to feel like you and the people around you are treated fairly. You want to feel connected to your company, to what's going on. And if at any time any of those slips, the very first question that you should ask yourself is, how can I reestablish that connection? Yes, sometimes it involves changing your job a bit. Maybe inside the company that you're with, maybe outside, going somewhere else. If it comes to it, hopefully not. But you have to define where that actually is, where those problems lie, in which of those 6 factors. Who's changed jobs here because they've been burnt out? If you could go back and not be burnt out, would you have stayed at those places? I would have. In hindsight, I would have. At the time, I certainly wouldn't have. But going back, yeah. I made some horrible career decisions because I was burning out. Because I didn't understand that, where these connections are and where they have to stay strong. You have to have self-confidence in the work that you're doing. And this goes to efficacy. And I think it's very important. I think it's very understated. If you're coming out from burnout, you can't just dive back into the work that you were doing. It's impossible. Your mind just isn't there. If you think about how you ramp up at a new job, you usually start with small things. You learn about the infrastructure. You learn about the people. You learn about how things are done. You have to go through that process again. You have to have small wins to build up that confidence and gradually progress to doing bigger and bigger things. So those 6 things, I've talked about them enough. Let's look at how how some of them can manifest as problems with your workload. Are you too available? And by that I mean, are you always around when somebody needs help? I am. It's part of my job. So I think it's probably part of most of our jobs to be around when people need help. But there is such a thing as being too available. People start to expect that you will always be available, even when you're busy and you need to get other things done. Is there too much work? I have too much work. I have way too much work. My to-do list just grows and it never ends. But being able to say no to some of that and push back on some of that and say, look, some of this work that needs to get done just isn't that important. It's actually really hard when you first try to do it. It's very, very difficult, but it's an important thing to learn how to do. Is the pressure to get it done too high? Are the stakes too high? I felt like when I was going through burnout, the stakes were really high. I had to save a lot of money. I had to move us to this more values-aligned thing, and I love open source, so I really want to get rid of this black box. Sometimes that pressure can be built up by ourselves. It doesn't have to be by our company, by other people giving us the work. We do it to ourselves. I want to give a little tip about micromanagement, because it really sucks. I hate it. I've been micromanaged multiple times. There are things you can do if you're being micromanaged. Usually when you are being put in that situation, it's because the person doing it feels like they really need a lot of information from you. It's not that they really want you to get things done in a very, very particular way and sit there and watch you do it. It's that they need information. And the only way they feel they can get it is by micromanaging you. So you can control that flow of information. I call it micromanaging back. You can control that information going upwards or sideways or wherever it's going. If you want, you can try overloading people with that information just like they're overloading you. Sometimes that really works well. You need to ask yourself if you have weak leadership. It happens. It's a thing. It's a legitimate thing. We don't like to talk about it because it's a little awkward. But weak leadership is an opportunity. It's an opportunity where we can step up and say, hey, why don't we have some more leadership here? I'm fortunate, I have really, really strong leadership where I work. But if I didn't, I would say it as an opportunity. I could say, hey, why don't we share some of this leadership responsibility? We can work on it together. We can help more people that way. Usually people are pretty open to things like that. Whole teams can be ineffective because they don't know how to work together. Team building exercises, a little weird sometimes. But they can be fun and they can genuinely help. Even little things like, let's just go out, have a drink once a week, once every other week. Go out to dinner. Do something. Reward, I think, this stuff is pretty obvious. Sometimes you just need to have a conversation. Sometimes if you feel like you need more money, okay, we all feel like we need more money. But you're not always going to get it. Maybe you can get something else. Maybe you can get to work from home a day or two a week. Maybe you can work slightly less hours. Maybe you can arrange for something like 20% time to give you some headspace, just to do some fun stuff. These are all rewards and perks and things that encourage us to do what we want to do. Fairness really comes down to whether you're being disrespected or whether you're being discriminated against. Disrespect often happens because people don't know you, they don't understand you, maybe they don't know what you're going through. It's a social thing. It's not a technical thing, which makes it harder than a technical thing to deal with, but establishing relationships with other people can really help with that. I'm really glad to see as an industry how much we're doing to tackle discrimination. In all kinds of discrimination. The last 5 years have been better than I've seen in the last 15. And embracing diversity really just helps. It's one of the most powerful things you can do to just break down discrimination. A few more slides left, promise, we're almost done. Community, again, there's some more things you can do to work on here. Has anyone here ever been to a conflict resolution workshop? Anyone done that? One person, two, three, four, a few people. I find, now I don't know how you folks feel about it, but I've actually found that to be one of the most beneficial things I've ever gone to. Because it taught me how to talk to other people. It just gave me hints on how to communicate difficult situations with the people around me. And how I can take that back. Like if somebody needs to have a difficult conversation with me, how to listen to people. It's amazing how much you can get done if you can just have difficult conversations with people and be okay about it. And values, of course. We've talked about this at some length as well. So your greatest responsibility, the one thing I'd really love everybody to take away from this, just one, is help your team stay sober. Yes, take care of yourself. But we live and we work in societies. We are human beings. We have communities. We have tribes. You call them whatever you want. You can't do all of these things by yourself. You help your team stay sober, they will help you stay sober. It's a community effort. We have to do it together. And I'm just about out of time, and I want to be able to take some questions. So I'm going to skip through the last slides. The slides will be on SlideShare later today. There are signs of burnout. These are signs that you can look for in other people. These are sort of the early indicators, the early warning systems. And there are some things that you can do when you start seeing signs of burnout. When you start seeing that people are burning out, encouraging them to take vacation time, to break away from work, helping them with their work, making sure you have more than one person on a major initiative. Don't burden one person with it. The third one up from the bottom is a silly one, but I've put it in there because it's amazing how much this one thing helps. If somebody is starting to feel ineffective, this one cool trick, just ask them for things that you know they know the answer to. It makes people feel good. When they're feeling down, it makes them feel valued. It's a little thing you can do. It really helps. Thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for questions, I think, maybe. My time is about 2 minutes. Anyone have questions?
Thank you for giving this talk. Very important. My question was, you answered part of it at some point, but it took almost a year for management to sit down with you.
Yes.
June to March the other year.
Yeah.
So,
June to June almost, yeah.
So do you have any more comments on that? Is that because you are remotely or?
Yeah.
You know, or
I had, so the question for the folks at the back is, it took almost a year for my management to sit down with me and have that very difficult conversation over tea in the park. It wasn't necessarily because I was remote. I actually had pretty good engagement with my manager. We had regular one-on-ones. But honestly, a lot of it was because I kept saying, everything's fine. It's great. Don't worry. It'll be all right. And it is also because at the time, I think we didn't know how to deal with burnout. This was, as far as I know, the first time anyone on this team, on the team I was on, had gone through this at this level. Everyone's gone through a little bit. We've all, most hands went up when I asked who's gone through burnout, through those stages. But on this team, it was one of the first times that it happened. Now we've put in some rules that just won't let us get to that point. We try very hard not to have only one person assigned to a major project. When we see people working late, we call them on it immediately. It's 7 o'clock. Why are you here? Why are you here? Well, shh. But we call people on it, right? And we call each other on it, but in a way that is respectful. we don't let people fall back into that trap. When we see them walking through those 12 steps, we try and catch it. Where I would say we're almost hyper aware of this, but it's helped. It's really, really helped. And I know for a fact that it's saved people on the operations team and on other teams at Etsy because we've been watching for this. So I think we are out of time, 12:30 now. But I will be around if anyone would like to chat a little bit more about this. Thank you.